Welcome, everyone, to the League of Women Voters Tacoma-Pierce County Candidate Forum for District Court Position 7. I am Lydia Zapeta, moderator for the forum. I begin this with a land acknowledgement. We gather on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples, surrounded by their traditional waters in the shadow of Mount Tahoma. We actively seek inclusive and respectful partnerships that honor Indigenous cultures, histories, identities, and current realities. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. Our mission is to empower informed and active participation of citizens in government. Candidate forums are one of the many ways we do this. We invited all the candidates for District Court Position 7. The candidates in ballot order are Eric J. Lawless, Mike Sommerfeld, and Pam Nogueira. The primary is August 4th. To register to vote or change your address, go to votewa.gov. That's votewa.gov by Monday, July 27th. If you're already registered as a voter, your ballot will be mailed July 14th. Your ballot must be postmarked or placed in a ballot drop box by 8 p.m. Tuesday, August 4th. This forum is being recorded and will be posted at our website, lwvtpc.org. We invite live audience questions via text to 253-948-6029. That's 253-948-6029. Questions must be directed to all candidates and may be reworded or consolidated. Our timekeeper is Terry Baker. Candidates, when your time is up, please stop. You may finish a short sentence. Please do not talk unless it's your turn, and please mute yourself when not speaking. A reminder that civility is expected. We ask each of you to confirm that you agree to our ground rules, which, among other things, include addressing the issues and not making personal comments. Please confirm by giving me a thumbs up. Thank you. I appreciate that. Each candidate has up to 2 minutes for an opening statement. After that, each candidate will be asked the same question. At the end, each candidate can make a 1-minute closing statement. The order of the 2-minute statements for District Court Position 7 is in ballot order. We'll start with Mike Sommerfeld. Your 2-minute opening statement, please.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to address all of you. I've lived in Pierce County since 1998. I'm a longtime resident. I've been a county attorney for almost 32 years now. I've divided my career pretty equally between civil and criminal work. And I've handled cases at every single court level in the state of Washington, from the district court to Superior Court, to the Court of Appeals, and to the Washington State Supreme Court. I've also been a pro tem judge in Thurston County, where I've presided over both civil and criminal cases of all kinds. I've handled at least 50 cases in front of the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, winning 5 out of 6 cases down there. I've been involved in our community since the 1990s. I'm very proud of my family, my wife's, and my commitment to Pierce County and its community. And so I do think that the district court presents a unique opportunity to meet the most members of our community and to provide solutions that are designed to fit their lives. I'm particularly interested in pursuing the alternative and therapeutic courts that district court offers, and the community supervision that it offers. And I'm particularly interested in restarting a drug court program in that court, because I think our community needs as many alternative courts as possible. And I think, courts are kind of a scary place for most people, but the district court is uniquely situated to be a place of hope and opportunity and positive change and positive outcome for the individuals who become court connected, and also for increasing community safety.
Thank you. Pam Nogueira, your 2-minute statement, please.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me today. I was just saying earlier, these forums and debates are such a beautiful exercise of our democracy, and I just really appreciate having the opportunity to be here today. 2 minutes to explain my career and professional experiences is a really short amount of time. I do have a website. It's pamforjudge.com. It has my cell phone and email address, and I'm happy to answer any questions today or at a later time to really share what I am about and what I have done. With that said, I have graduated from the University of Washington, Tacoma, as well as the University of Washington School of Law. Tacoma was really my first home away from home. I was born and raised in Brazil and do speak, obviously, Portuguese, English, and have quite a bit of Spanish. I have chosen Tacoma, even though I have not been raised here. I've chosen this place as a home, and it means a lot to me to have an opportunity to give back. This community has shaped so much of who I am today and the choices that I have made in my career. I have previously been a court commissioner and a judge for the city of Olympia, and I was a judge up and until February when that court closed due to budgetary decisions. I continue to be a judge pro tem. I have always done and practiced the areas that every district court operates in, which is criminal law, civil protection orders, and civil litigation. So I do bring a lot of experience. I also have a unique perspective, have already been a sitting judge, and having practiced in these same areas my entire career. I also think I bring a unique perspective as an immigrant woman to this community who has practiced in many different jurisdictions and has seen what's worked and what has not worked in all of these different jurisdictions. Happy to answer some questions moving forward, but again, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to move to the questions. You have 90 seconds to answer each question. For question number one, we'll start with Pam Nogueira. We all see it every day. Traffic infractions have been rising in Pierce County as a result of widespread speeding and distracted driving. This has resulted in more injuries, fatalities, and higher insurance rates for all of us. It's also resulted in a backlog of cases in district court. How does the backlog affect the court's influence on driving behavior? Please explain. Pam Nogueira.
Thank you. The backlog should not influence the decisions of the court. It should influence the procedures of the court as to how we address everything effectively and purposefully. One thing that we did in Olympia in order to facilitate the resolution of these cases was accepting mail resolutions as well as email resolutions. So folks wouldn't necessarily have to come in for a court hearing, but they could write a letter under penalty of perjury or an email under penalty of perjury. And we had forms for both things. And it really facilitated and helped us move along those cases. And it also obviously gave folks an ability to be heard without necessarily missing work or school to come to court and address their needs.
Thank you. Mike Sommerfeld, how does the backlog affect the court's influence on driving behavior? Explain.
Well, I think it's a negative influence to be pretty frank on the answer, because when you've got a backlog like that, it's increasing the amount of time that it's taking to adjudicate. And that's really not in the interests of the court. It sends a bad message to the community on what is a fair resolution on the case. And if accountability is what's necessary in the particular case, delaying that is certainly an issue that is something that the court should address. And I think one way that could address that would be to look at court calendars. We've got different judicial officers who are available. The court has 8 county designated judges. It also has a commissioner. And so I think what we ought to do is we ought to, and I think some of the things that Pam discussed about in terms of being able to do mail resolutions is great. Although we do have the ability to resolve cases by mail at this time, there might be some more opportunities. But I really think that we ought to look at the calendars themselves and the apportionment of infraction work. I'm hearing that there really is more availability in the calendars And so I think if you've got a backlog in a particular area, then you adjust your calendars and you essentially add work to the days and resolve that backlog to make sure that these problems are addressed timely.
Thank you. Next question we'll start with Mike Sommerfeld. Funding for courts has not kept pace with caseloads. Talk about what you perceive as the greatest need for resources, and if possible, how to fund them. Mike Sommerfeld.
This is really largely an issue that has to be addressed legislatively, because if you're not addressing it legislatively, then what you're doing is you're just imposing more fines on individuals who are coming into court. And that's one of the things that we've been trying to do in the court system is de-emphasize the burdens financially that courts have been placing on individuals, because it becomes not only an access issue, but it also becomes essentially indentured servitude by the court. And I lived through that experience as a deputy prosecutor in the 90s in the district court. I saw the impact of hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars in fines being owed by individuals. And we were essentially trying to finance the court on the backs of individuals. That's not a sustainable model. What you're doing in that event anyway is you're sending things to collections, and you're just trying to get money from individuals who are already impoverished. You can't get the financing for the court that way. This really comes down fundamentally to getting adequate resources out of the legislative body that funds the court. And I think it has to be a cooperative effort through the local council, the county council, as well as the state legislature, in ensuring that the courts and the programs are adequately funded. And I think that's something we need to work towards.
Thank you. Pam Nogueira, talk about what you perceive as the greatest needs for resources and, if possible, how to fund them.
Thank you. Having created a court budget previously, I know that budget, especially in the public sector, is always problematic and difficult. And I will say that Mike is not incorrect in saying that a lot of those needs come from the legislative sector. However, I do think, especially with treatment courts, there is a huge opportunity for grants, federal, state, and even local, that has been a very huge opportunity for most courts. I know the Administrative Office of the Courts, AOC, funds most treatment courts in the state of Washington, and that really truly alleviates the budget for the regular calendars and the other part of the court system. I know that that's something that, especially in Olympia, it really helped us in even our budget out. But I will say that we always, as judges, we receive grant opportunities for technology, for security, and for other things. So one thing that I have always thought it would be very beneficial to the court is to actually employ a grant writer, so that that person had an opportunity to potentially create additional resources to the court system. Because Mike is correct, we should not be passing that along to court participants.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Pam Nogueira. Given the realities that it will take time to increase funding, how will you address the backlog of cases in your courtroom if elected?
So addressing backlog is a combination of factors. First and foremost, it is something that we need to address as far as calendars go, and reorganizing what it's already happening so that work is properly distributed amongst the judicial officers and the court dates. It is also something that we need to work together with the prosecutor's office, because the reality is oftentimes, especially criminal backlogs, is something that comes from the prosecutor's office filing cases or not filing cases, or when they're filed. So that is something that needs to be worked alongside them and alongside Washington State Patrol and the Sheriff's Office, who are oftentimes doing their citations as well and bringing these cases to court. So it's something that needs to be worked out alongside other stakeholders. And I think that creating a communication amongst those court stakeholders is really important as well. I created a justice committee that we would meet on a quarterly basis down in Olympia so that we could continue to have that communication and ensuring that our values were on the same page and that we could address and modify things on an as needed basis. And I think that having something here would be really beneficial as well. And I apologize, there's so much more to say, but it's so little time.
Thank you. Mike Sommerfeld.
Thank you. I lived through backlogs of cases in Superior Court in the early 2000s when we were getting into numbers like 2,500 pending cases. We don't have quite the same problems with criminal case backlogs in the district court, although I do think that there are some opportunities for perhaps having discussions about essentially reallocating criminal cases. Public safety has to be a priority, right? Fundamentally, public safety has to be the priority of the court. DUIs and domestic violence assault are definitely sort of the bread and butter public safety cases that go through the district courts. And so I think if you are seeing any backlogs in that it is incumbent upon all members of the court to sit down and have discussions about spreading those cases out. When it comes to the infractions, again, I do think that is an issue. And I do think that there is room in existing calendars, meaning I don't think everybody's there in their calendars until 5 o'clock every day. I think you could even consider hybrid calendars, but you do have to absolutely emphasize public safety and prioritize those cases. Some backlog in the prosecutor's office has to do with cases that haven't been charged. It takes the state crime lab a year to get chemical analysis now on DUIs. But once those cases are filed with the court, that should not create a backlog within the court. And that has to be their priority.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Mike Sommerfeld. My understanding is that there's been some issues transitioning to modern judicial software. Please talk about any of your concerns with respect to judicial software and/or cybersecurity issues. Mike Sommerfeld.
Great question. The district court entered into an experimental program, with the administrative office of the court, which is a statewide agency that deals with the courts. I'm the attorney for district court. I was up until the moment that I filed my candidacy, at which point I suspended that position because I didn't want to create a conflict. But I've been their attorney for the last 4 years, and I was aware of that contract that was going on with AOC. But it hasn't really turned out to be very viable. The city of Tacoma has also had great problems with the programs. Pierce County is fortunate in that we have our own native created software called LINX, Legal Information Network Exchange. The superior courts use it, the prosecutors use it, the public defender's office uses it, the sheriff's office uses it, the jail uses it. It's really a comprehensive court management system, and it's a great way to track data. The district court needs to be on that program because what's critical is that we want to be able to track cases. We want to be able to track and measure outcomes. How are we doing? And the beauty of the LINX system is because it's created internally by our own IT department is that we can program it. If we have certain needs, we can create the software to do the type of data measurements that we want. And so that's really where this needs to go. We need to get away from the state model.
Thank you. Pam Nogueira.
Well, we finally found something we disagree on. And I will say that as a user, I do love LINX. It's very user-friendly. It's a very wonderful program. But as a judicial officer, there are problems with that. And the reason why I say that is when we are looking at somebody's criminal history, for instance, we look at the state system, and it's very important to see if that person has prior convictions of driving while under the influence, if they have prior history of domestic violence. And LINX doesn't always communicate with JABS and other statewide systems. So it can prevent a judicial officer from seeing those specific convictions if they're not utilizing the same system. As of right now, they do not marry well. So if and until those programs start working together, I cannot in good faith say that that is the best for the community, because again, I do think as far as community safety goes, it is very important to me to know whether that individual is a first-time offender or if they're in their third DUI. So to me, I do see the benefit of the statewide system. I think it is very important that it is corrected and managed well so that we do have better benefits, because I do understand how problematic that transition has been as well.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Pam Nogueira. Please talk about your views on the use and/or expansion of court diversion programs, specifically the use of online services and live chat for nonviolent and qualifying cases, and the Center for Dialogue and Resolution for Civil or Neighborhood Disputes. Pam Nogueira.
So I'm about to be a board member of the DRC, so I don't want to go too much because I don't want to create a conflict here. Clearly, I'm a fan. As for diversion programs are created by prosecutors' offices. I'm a huge fan of these programs and I strongly support them. However, a true diversion program is often pre-filing, which means the court system is not involved at all. So I want to limit my answer because I don't believe I have ever had the authority or would ever have the authority to create or manage those programs. With regards to online resources, I think if they're truly vetted ahead of time and they're also given an opportunity for folks that don't necessarily have access to them, then that could be an extremely resourceful way of addressing some of our community's needs. But again, I do want to always remind and be conscientious of the fact that a lot of our community don't have access to online resources. So I just want to make sure that, again, we do provide equal access to resources, and that means understanding that there are different barriers throughout the community. Whew. Sorry, I'm trying to speak so fast to fit it all in.
Thank you. Mike Sommerfeld.
Thank you. I agree with Pam's comments about the online resources because, what it really gets down to is you're looking at the affected community. And so a lot of times you really have to go, what I kind of call old school with letters for a lot of that communication. And not only letters, but you have to have, strong infrastructure set up in the courts. And I guess what I would analogize to is what we have out at Raymond Hall, the juvenile court for youths. And I think that's something that can work really well in an adult model. I've got a lot of experience in the juvenile diversion programs, having worked out in the juvenile court for years as a prosecutor, and those programs worked really well. They were excellent at essentially being able to identify underlying issues for individuals that needed to be treated, root causes, things of that nature, where we could avoid negative outcomes with convictions and endless court hearings that really weren't achieving anything. You do have to have strong screening criteria, which means you've got to have strong collaboration between prosecutors and particularly the public defenders, because they are seeing the most clientele. Which means you're sitting down and having lots of strong discussions, and you've got to have strong criteria for those who can go in and out of that community of diversion. And I think they are highly successful programs. King County's been very successful with some programs to that effect recently.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Mike Sommerfeld. How would you ensure that your courtroom is accessible to all? Be specific about accommodations and interpretation services.
Thank you. This is a real priority for me. Did you say interpretation services, interpreter services?
So accommodations
Yes.
and interpretation services.
So
physical accommodations as well.
And I think if I understand with interpretive services, yes, we have to, we know who is in our community. We know what the predominant languages are for that. And so trying to increase interpretive services is something that I think we need to do. We have too few people running around. When it comes to accommodations, that's really a major issue for me. I've had some great conversations with Justice Helen Whitener on the Supreme Court, and she has been involved in pursuing disability access issues that are existing in the state. And, it's really appalling. The Americans with Disabilities Act was enacted in 1990. It took our Supreme Court 17 years to enact a general court rule mandating meaningful accommodations by the courts for individuals who have disability issues. And I can tell you that, I am the father of a neurodiverse adolescent. And so this really hits home for me. But we have a complete blind spot in our courts right now. Our online platforms, our public-facing platforms are silent. They're not only awful, they're silent on providing meaningful information to individuals who need accommodations. So this needs to be essentially uprooted from top to bottom at the court system, because people need to be able to contact the court weeks in advance of their hearings and get accommodations. That's not happening.
Thank you. Pam Nogueira.
That is a huge question. And there are so many different ways to be looked at from a physical site to really the culture within the court system. And yes, we do need online and really in-person as well methods of addressing these accommodation requests that are much more efficient and responsive to what the needs of our community are. I will say that with interpretation services specifically, and again, I keep talking about Olympia, but it's because it's where I have done a lot of the work that we've been talking about. We created a really great policy for interpreter services where at any point in a probable cause report, if there was any mention of language barrier, or if the jail ever mentioned a language barrier, that an interpreter was requested immediately, and that interpreter was notified, and that the defense attorney was notified of the interpreter needs and the availability of the interpreter, so that they could communicate with client and be present in the court ahead of the court hearing for an opportunity to be heard as well. And that worked wonderfully, so that, again, we were never continuing hearings or maintaining the individual in custody for longer than needed based on the lack of an interpreter services. AOC is, sorry, time's up.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Pam Nogueira. In a case where you can apply discretion, how would you apply your discretion? Tell us your approach and the steps that you would take. Pam Nogueira.
Thank you. May I ask a question about the question?
Yes, you may, and I may not be able to answer it.
Are we talking about criminal cases or civil protection orders?
Both.
Okay, all of the above.
All of the above.
Obviously, first and foremost, I always say it's about how you treat people. And conducting and ensuring that every court participant understands what's happening and why it's happening. Secondly, it's about understanding and following the law. Obviously, when there is discretion, I like to think that I start every decision with the question, why am I doing this? What is the purpose of this decision? And the reason why I ask that to myself is because there should be different results for different purposes. And as a judge, my favorite thing is to have a huge toolbox with lots of resources available so that I could apply different tools to different resolutions. So for instance, if I had someone that was a first-time offender that was struggling with substance use, I could send them to get treatment and get some help. I also really liked that I created a resource center in my own courtroom and was able to send folks to that resource center to get resources on the same day of their court hearing. But again, sometimes that purpose changes. And I think it is really important to be very intentional with every decision that we make and understand that decision impacts not only the community, but the individual and their families and potential victims. So again, intentionality is the priority.
Thank you. Mike Sommerfeld.
Thank you. I think you start from the premise that you're applying all of the applicable law as rigorously as you can, whether that's a statute or a case interpreting a statute, so that you're doing what you can to ensure equal and fair treatment of everybody, that you're impartial about that. But there's a lot of room after that, particularly when it comes to um, diversion agreements, deferred prosecutions, for example, because as opposed to a pre-court diversion, there are deferred prosecution opportunities in courts, whether to grant that. So you're looking at people's backgrounds. You get into issues of discretion, obviously, in sentencing, and district court in particular has a tremendous amount of discretion. It's very different from superior court in that regard, and because district court also has probation services, you've got a lot more tools at your disposal in implementing discretion. But in how you implement it, I agree. What you have to do is you've got to look at the individual, and I think it's very, very important that judges look at people's background and their experiences in deciding how to exercise that discretion. And you have to meet people where they are, and you have to listen to their circumstances and try to fashion the best outcomes for them. You have to consider them and the community.
Thank you. So last question, and we'll start with Mike Sommerfeld. What strategies would you use to remain impartial while presiding over a case? Or what strategies do you use?
I think it starts with understanding that you're there to apply the law fairly and neutrally, and that's also beneficial to the parties, because the best way that they can measure how to proceed in their cases is by knowing that a judge is simply going to follow the law. But the other thing that you have to do is it is very different when you're on the bench, and I have felt this. You're not there to advocate for a particular side, and you have to be mindful of that. You have to be aware of biases and implicit biases. Our Supreme Court has spoken to the need for all parties in the courtroom to do this, but particularly judges have to be aware of any implicit biases that they may have and how their experiences led them to where they are. So being impartial is absolutely essential because it also promotes the court as having public confidence. And we're at a time right now when the courts are under attack. And so you do have to project that impartiality. And I think the way you do that is you let people know that you're listening to them, you're reading everything that they are providing to the court, and you're explaining your decisions to them and why you reached it, so that when they leave, if you didn't give them everything that they wanted, they at least understand that you listened to them.
Thank you. Pam Nogueira.
Thank you. There is a reason why judges wear the black robe, and that is so that we are a clean slate. We come into the courtroom, we put on our uniform, and we put our personal opinions and bias aside. And I think that ritual of putting the black robe is a daily reminder of our neutrality and our purpose in the courtroom. Along with that ritual, I think that continued education is one of the most useful resources that a judge can have about being educated about the law, but also about human behavior, about criminology, substance use, mental health, patterns of domestic violence, and being as prepared for the courtroom experience without your own personal opinions and biases, but about the law and evidence and facts and studies on these same issues, so that we can make decisions based on what we ought to and not on what our opinions may be. Again, it's not about us. It's about the law, and we are a representative of justice and of the laws that have been placed in this state. So again, I think for me, that ritual of daily putting that black robe is probably the most useful reminder of neutrality. But I'm also a very passionate about continued education.
Thank you. Now it's time for closing statements. Each candidate has 1 minute for their closing statement. So we'll start with Pam Nogueira. Your 1 minute statement, please.
Thank
You're muted. You're muted.
I pressed the button, but it didn't stick. I am running for this position specifically because it aligns with both my experience and purpose in public service. Pierce County District Court is where many people have their first and most direct interaction with the justice system, and the decisions that are made there affect their everyday lives in an immediate and meaningful ways. It's where you can make the most difference in our community. My background has prepared me particularly well for this court. As a former judge, Superior Court commissioner, and as a practicing attorney, I have experience in making fair, timely, and impartial decisions from the bench. My work directly in criminal law, litigation, protection orders directly reflects the core work of district court. And this is also very personal to me, as I really truly have chosen Tacoma specifically and Pierce County in general as my home. It is just dear to my heart, and I'm glad to serve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Sommerfeld.
Thank you. Thank you for having. I'm running for this office because the district court, again, is the most important court, I think, in the county system because it encounters the most people. And the court has both criminal and civil work. My background covers both of those areas. I've got about 32 years of experience in civil and criminal work. I've handled everything at every level of the district court, and I've handled cases at every level of the Washington state courts. I've gone to the Supreme Court and worked on DUI decisions to improve community safety. My wife and I really value service in our community. I've been a board member assisting youth who age out of the foster system, amongst other things. So I really care about this community. I think I've got a lot of experience to offer to the court, and that's why I'm running, and I would appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you both. The candidates for District Court Position 7 in ballot order are Eric J. Lawless, Mike Sommerfeld, and Pam Nogueira. Your ballot will be mailed on July 14th. And be sure to vote early and no later than August 4th. I'd like to thank the candidates who participated, the timekeeper, Terry Baker, and Tacoma-Pierce County League of Women Voters. You can see other League of Women Voter forums at lwvtpc.org. That's lwvtpc.org. Read your voters pamphlet, read the candidates' websites, and don't forget to vote before August 4th. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.